I've done a few of these now, the lists where I make a collection of books. They can take a few years to make. They often start not as a collection. It's a little group of books that might come together on your bookshelf, and they start to bounce off each other and slowly through. It's often a very slow process of secondhand bookshops, new bookshops, op shopping, things people tell me about. It's a finding process, so you might actually think about it in that slightly tumbling, accidental material you chance upon strategy rather than a directed way of collecting. It grows, it changes, it forms. I add things, I take things away. I have to admit I also sometimes go online to look on secondhand sites to add things in. And then comes the difficult bit where I know that once I've done that, there's no point hanging on to it. It's got to go into the next stage of its being, which it could, actually now that as I speak aloud to you, I've never thought about it before, it just could become a piece of work which is a library that sits on someone's bookshelf which they can read rather than display. Maybe that's the next one. But what has happened in the 3 that I've made before is the books then become material, and the material then informs, it brings its own logic to it. And in this instance, I decided that this book list that I've made was pleasing. I had a few years to make it, and then I decided that I wanted to release the books, to release their spirit, in a sense. Then there's another side. I do a lot of drawing and collages, but it's all for many years been a kind of secret work in drawers, and increasingly I've been bringing those two things together. And so this, I think it's 15-meter long drawing collage is in a slightly tongue-in-cheek and of course metaphorical material way releasing the spirit of those books together into a kind of mist or swarm, which renders the books illegible, but maybe it does something else, I don't know.
Yes, and it creates that kind of celestial space or something that kind of, well, just, I don't know, looks like a cosmic chart or something or other. That's just a very simple reading.
I like it, I like that.
Okay, so maybe the releasing of the spirits, but the circular nature of things, I think, is the next question. I just have flux. Okay, flux obviously relates to fluxus and another much earlier period in art making, and I can't say that it's something as a period and thing that I consciously have ever thought about, but it's a nice little link. Yes, entropy. Entropy, that whole process of the energy and the work and that wonderful intellectual thinking, engagement, reading, material crafting to make something which is then just going to fall apart is very appealing. I think, of course I can open it up for you in political or philosophical or literary or poetic ways, but I don't want to do that because I think that has got to do its own work, and I like to think that I'm simply a channeler of that energy and the maker of those forms. And I will admit to a very deep pleasure, sometimes guilty, but I'd like to say not so guilty, of making, of having my eyes behind a lens, of looking for something through the camera, of drawing, of forming, of struggling with that difficulty of how to make non-language sense out of things that I'm actually thinking about in a very language-based way, but hence pulling the language apart as well. So that would be the next point I wanted to... Well, I don't know if you remember. You wouldn't remember, is a better point. But I was in a class of Gary Castley, and you came in and you talked about something. I just kept on trying to remember what you were talking about. You were talking about sketches, and you were talking about this idea...
I remember that, yeah.
Yes.
And Gary was like, well, you know, the thing about Simryn, and I was like, well, I'm sure it's not the thing about Simryn, but he said you're very attracted to this sense of the wobbly.
Yeah. Well, Gary's right. He's a good friend. Wobbly is a word that I use a lot, or messy, but wobbly is a good word because it's that a thing can't come to rest. The idea that something comes to rest has arrived at its place of finishedness. I have a lot of difficulty with. So hence I do tend to make works which are very open-ended, which could go on forever, but at some point I go, I'm bored, I have other things to do, I run out of money, the people who want it now. So there are these arbitrary things that make these things stop. But sometimes, for instance, when these kinds of things might go into a collection, I continue to send more of the same to whoever might have it. And hence the notion of the sketching and drawing and I guess this is very in the air now, as opposed to painting is very attractive because it's a momentary thing which actually doesn't have a completion point. You can't say my sketch is finished because a sketch is only a sketch, and hence and similarly in a conversation is not an essay, and the open-endedness of talking and conversations as a form in which to explicate and develop and express quite deep and serious things is the sketch form, if you like, of text, as opposed to the painting form of text, which might be the heavy finished essays, and I know what I lean towards.
And it's very much, it exists within the same system of logic, so it can use the same shorthand or something, but it's not necessarily, doesn't have to be so prescriptive. As you say, it's propositional or something.
Exactly, and which I know the medium that we're doing this on is one that, as we spoke about before we started, is its finished state, if you like, is going to be something that is on the internet and is available. And that's a curious thing, and I'm actually thinking about this as we're speaking, and I can't say this is something I've thought about too much before, but it's almost as if these kinds of conversations we have, which then finish up on the internet and available, lie somewhere between that conversational, open-ended, experimental, propositional to the finished and fixed essay, because what happens is that I'm testing out ideas with you as I speak because I've forgotten that there's a camera present, but at the same time it's going to become fixed in the medium that it's going to go out in, so that as you know, artists who have their, say, juvenilia sketches opened up and are being analysed for incredible, deep and meaningful things which might have just been a slip of a pen or an accidental mark, and that can be overdone. And somehow I was going to say I wonder if at some point this is going to come to a place where the spoken as continually present, something that's spoken in the frame of a very brief moment, but being continually present on the internet, is going to be understood for what it is. And I sense that we haven't come to that place yet.
I alternate between that idea of, the more things change, the more they stay the same, which is kind of, depressing but reliable. And then the other thing, which is you never put your hand in the same stream twice.
Yeah.
Everything, nothing changes. It's only we have this urge to kind of concretize or apply a system of logic or apply a linguistic framework or something.
The formation of the exhibition has been very collaborative. It's been actually, the exhibition itself is an outcome of precisely that process, that method we've been talking about, which is conversational. I know, dialogue is a word that's used. It's not a word that I lean towards too much. It's a bit bit yeah, rigid for me. It's much more playful. But not playful in a light way. You know, we've talked now for 18 months, and when one has the privilege to work with a curator who can work in that who does work in that incredibly open and collaborative way, and that's my preferred way of working as well. It's a very powerful experience, and the show is an outcome of that. So she would propose something and I will either agree or disagree, or she plants an idea in my head and I go away and think about it, or I say this is what I want to do and she'll come back. And so the process started on one level in that way. On another level, the conversation started in the pavilion when we came to look at the pavilion. And there's a fabulous canopy of trees over it, and I said to her, I really would like to take the roof off. We were here in the autumn and the light is very nice outside, and I wanted to bring that outside light in, which is very soft and misty. And you know, I mean, she said to me, well, curiously, I was thinking about the same thing, and that's it's that very nice, we resonate very well on that level. And then there is the upstairs and downstairs, and the way in which those two spaces are stitched together through the work Naught, which appears on many different walls, and the choice of which walls will take the ink is very much a curatorial process. Then again, the desire to ink the walls black was something that I brought to the table very early and said I wanted to put Indian/Chinese ink on the walls. And to achieve that, Catherine insisted that we should have the walls plastered by a Venetian plasterer. And then I said, well, then I'd like to put my pictures into the walls like frescoes, because I don't like them floating out. So the Cibachromes have been set in like a series of frescoes. So it's this very strong kind of playing and pushing that went on through the show.
And they have that beautiful shiny kind of patina or finish as well.
Yeah.
Kind of echoes that fresco kind of polish.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we could talk for hours, obviously.
Yeah.
Is there anything which we absolutely must talk about? The video, perhaps, or the title, or we?
The title came at the very beginning. That's often it's very important to have a title early because it forms. And when I decided the roof had to come off and it was autumn and the leaves were falling, the title came immediately. And then it resonated on many levels. The here could be Venice, it could be the Australian landscape, it could be in our minds, it could be the pavements where I pick up the things in. And actually, perhaps the most, for me, precious piece in the show, which is very invisible almost, which is that old Super 8 film that it's old, it's that old 10-year-old Super 8 film that I shot some years ago on just off the beach in my hometown, which was one of those things Catherine pulled out of my drawer. She goes, so do you have any film? And I'd never seen it. I'd shot it, but never had the possibility to view it. And a friend in Sydney put it onto, transferred it onto that medium where you can see it on a computer. And we saw it, and that became actually the driving underbelly of the whole process, that mangrove of the tide coming in and out, and we found a way to put it in the show as well.